not Mamie Love, but and the rest of them. But I'm a member of the NAACP. But I am presently also the vice president of the North Louisiana Civil Rights Coalition, and we have been working with the local museum and trying to get a civil rights museum at the old Galilee Baptist Church. Also, this film, we have collaborated with the Caddo Parish School Board, and in the last several years, we have taken this film into the State Museum building, and the school board agreed to bust in students who were in their social service classes, social studies classes, and so over 1,000 students of Caddo Parish have seen this document. And so they have been enlightened to a whole lot of information. And to be present at some of those gatherings were just amazing. We had one little white boy from Northern Caddo who, after this documentary had been shown, he got up and he said, "You mean to tell me that many years ago, back in that day, I would not have been able to have my best friend sitting with me in this?" I mean, his mind was blown away. He could not fathom how that happened. And that's one of the things that all of us have a responsibility to do. Not only to produce the love that has been so greatly spoken about, but to make sure that our youth and other youngsters know about what has happened, what their history is, what has gone forth. And we all have to try to join together in any way that we can to make sure that we move forward in these efforts and endeavors.
I do use this video quite a bit as a way, or this film to start dialogue. I myself am from Shreveport. I grew up here, went through the school system, and I have to be honest, I didn't learn any of this here. And so one of the goals that we have moving forward really is to try to engage young people about the events of the civil rights movement, and this film has been fantastic at being able to start a dialogue in that capacity. So I just wanted to add that.
Was Senator Tarver, who served on the Caddo Commission and also was one of the first city council persons.
Okay.
First three.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
The barbers and beauticians were and Baptist pastors particularly, were the freest people in the city to speak for us. When my home was threatened, barbers slept inside of the house, outside, for months to make sure my family was not harmed. I don't mean to dominate this, but I am the oldest thing.
That's good.
Ma'am, there's never a majority in the history of the world who support right. There were churches, for instance, in this city whose trustee boards voted that Martin King could not speak at that church, black churches. There were about 4 or 5 churches. Little Union was one, Evergreen, St. Rest, Galilee. That's about it. Even the church I pastor now would not have permitted Martin King to speak there. So we can't come up with percentage, and if you did, I would say less than 10%. Who led the movement in America, what we've overlooked, were the young people. They didn't have anything to lose, and we don't give them credit for what they did.
That's it.
There's always a small group that make the majority to stand up and fight. It's just like any other, like the abortion rights. There's only a small group that stands up and make the movement. It's not the masses of people do it. The masses of people are afraid to get involved. The reason why people like Reverend Harry Blake, the beauticians, and others, because they were independent. They were basically independent from everybody else. They made their own money. They had money in the black community, and they stayed together. The barbers only cut black hair. The beautician dealt with black hair. The preachers had black members. And that is the reason why they could do a lot of more things than anybody else, is because they were basically independent from the white man. And he could not get to them. And the ones who basically worked for the whites usually go and tell all the black business. They come to the meetings and communicate the business to their boss man. And that is the reason why we had ministers and people involved. My brother Leon, he was an undertaker, he got involved, I got involved, and all of us. But it's people who led the movement, like Reverend Harry Blake, who stood up for all of us, even the black and white. Because, you know, when you holding a black man down, you're down yourself, you can't move. So he's the one who really made the move. There's Maxine Sarpy, Louis Pendleton, Jesse Stone, all of these people. They're the ones, they were basically independent. Dr. Sarpy had black clients. That's why basically he was independent, could do what he liked to do.
And you buried all the black folks.
Yeah.
On a Canon HD photo camera that had a video setting. We shot it on a camera that had a video setting, high definition, that quite a lot of TV shows are shot on, and I happen to own it, so that helped having the equipment. Tim and I made the time for the interviews. Tim, the most miraculous thing, he went to Washington, D.C. to grab Larry Boogaloo Cooper, and literally took a train up there, interviewed Larry, and got back on the train the same day and came back.
That's called commitment.
And then going through the LSU archives, this had never been done before. KSLA, we had heard rumors that there was footage somewhere, and we thought, well, somebody had to cover this news back then.
Right.
We found at LSU archives the KSLA collection. It had certain events, but they made up the list by the 3 words that was on the outside of the reel of the tape. Not always descriptive. We discovered Dr. King live at Galilee that you saw here on a film strip that said, "Parking problem at Negro Rally."
Wow.
The news coverage that night was, look at this horrible mess here, all these cars, you know, that something's going on in this church and they're making this parking mess. So, and there was no civil rights archives, so one by one, Tim and I looked at hundreds of 8mm films and compiled an archive that LSU now has indexed where you can find this footage. Incredible stuff. As I was marveling with Tim, I hadn't seen this recent edit until tonight. As Ms. Sarpy spoke, there was a film, or there was a photo of that exact moment. Dartoys in the white helmet, her medical center. Amazing the things that fell into our lap, but it took quite a long time to find the same.
A question for Mr.
Let's see here. Going from just about 10 minutes from here, I grew up on Howell Hill, right outside of downtown, and started out at Brook Street Elementary, which is now CSI Lab, and basically getting converted to Broadmoor Middle School is when the change started in the community of integration, where it was a lot safer after all of the battles that our elders had to make it safe for us to go to different schools, give us an opportunity to expand across Shreveport. And just looking back at Sister Braggs, who was actually the first graduate of Byrd High School, it's one of those things where you go, wow. You don't realize that until you actually basically get an opportunity like I did, to get an opportunity in the 70s to see, or basically not be in a position where you could actually see what was around you, and it didn't filter to your area. Even though I grew up in the neighborhood, I was never in a position where I actually got basically in a situation or encountered a situation where it bothered me or my family. So all of the struggles that were actually fought were still around. Dartars was still there. He was still commissioner, as awful person as he was. But it kind of, the things basically start to become hidden because of the communities had actually grown together. You can move around the city without having worries of police officers assaulting you.
People still don't want to talk about it. Right. We went to the other side of the track. Right. You know what we got? No. Embarrassed. So it's not that there wasn't an effort. It was just no's.
Well, ma'am, Mr. Dortoy has held this city in the palm of his hand. For instance, whenever there was a rally or civil rights rally, he had someone in the rally to record every speaker, and if you work for the school board or an industry, that speech was sent to your boss and you lost your job. White folk were held as much hostage during the civil rights movement as blacks. There were those who gave money behind the scene, but they could not show their hand. Jasmine, you're my member, so I'm giving you permission.
I want to bills owed on this project. Until those bills are satisfied, we only can show it in settings like this. And once those bills are satisfied, then we can show it nationally and then hopefully worldwide. It deserves to go worldwide.
Right.
I'll write you a hot check.
You're right.
And if I could just say a few words, that there were some that were active then and have been sort of active through the years, and one of them is Attorney Walker, Henry Walker, who has been very active during those years, and also the owner of one of our radio stations, Miss Marie Gifford, who became very active during that time with us, and she was out in the public with it and made it very well known. Unfortunately, she's deceased now. And before we close, I just want to give thanks and for us to give a round of applause to TD and to Joey here.
Thank you for coming and see my name in lights. I work for Mr. Dortoys. And sometimes when I'm in this kind of setting, I saw on film somebody said the black police officer would call his name. Who was that? Well, I know. When I came on the police force, there were only 5 blacks. 1968. Don't worry about how old I am. But I had to work under those kind of conditions. Old soldiers never die. And they don't ever shut up. That's my attitude now. Still working it. Thank you, Mr. Tarver. You know how far we've come. I was there, first black detective, one of the first, and Mr. Kinchin, your ex-husband, rode with me. We were part of this history of Mr. Dortoy's work for him. Had to work under those conditions. We could only ride in the black areas. One day I got called to task for riding down the street here in front of Stand Record Shop. That was offbeat for me. I wasn't allowed to ride downtown. Whenever we got new patrolman in, black, we come from Barksdale. I had to ride with, that was fine with us, 4 in a car because they couldn't ride with the white officers. Great. Because we get to wave at all the little ladies. No, I don't do that now, my wife. But thank you for having me mention.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You need to really watch and applaud the North Louisiana Civil Rights
Right.
Coalition. They're doing great work and you need to support.
Thank you all so much for coming. Like I said, there is a reception upstairs. I believe there will be certainly the directors up there, maybe a couple of the panelists to answer any additional questions you might have. But again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.